He looked at me with eyes that once held love and said, "You have 12 hours to leave this house." Those words didn't just take away a home. They shattered the last illusion that family means safety. Grief had already hollowed out my heart, but betrayal carved what was left into silence. That moment wasn't about losing walls or furniture. It was about realizing that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the same hands that once held yours. When life strips you of everything familiar, you discover who you are beneath the comfort of belonging. Pain becomes the teacher, truth the only weapon. And when the people you trusted most turn your sorrow into opportunity, you learn that justice is not born from anger. It's born from the courage to stand up, even when standing is all you can do. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about rediscovering strength when love turns cold, about rebuilding truth from ashes, and proving that dignity doesn't die just because trust does. Because sometimes, losing everything is the only way to remember what was truly yours all along. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. If you've ever trusted someone only to watch that trust shatter in a single moment, stay right here, because what happens next will make you question how well we ever truly know the people closest to us. The late afternoon light fell across the adobe courtyard, turning the clay walls into a deep shade of gold. The wind that moved through the pines carried the faint smell of burnt wood from the morning fire and the lilies that were beginning to wilt on the porch. The house was silent now, too silent for a place that had once echoed with laughter, music, and Evelyn's humming from the kitchen. I stood by the same window where she used to hang paper stars for Christmas, and for the first time in 43 years, I felt the air inside this house no longer belonged to both of us. Evelyn had been gone less than 12 hours. The funeral still clung to me, the low hymns, the murmured condolences, the neighbors pressing my hands. Santa Fe's sun was merciless, even in grief. Every corner of the house was filled with her touch. The brush marks on the dining room wall, the oil-stained apron still hanging behind the pantry door. We bought this house in 1992, when adobe walls were cheaper than steel, and we shaped it with our own hands. I carved the beams and window frames. She painted the walls in colors she said looked like late afternoon. She always believed light could make people gentle. Caleb and Maya arrived not long after the last neighbor left. He wore a dark jacket that didn't fit, and she looked like someone who'd been rehearsing sympathy. They stood in the doorway, speaking softly at first, asking if I'd eaten, if I was managing okay. Their tone was too calm, too rehearsed. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Caleb told me the house had been taken care of already. He said Evelyn had signed documents weeks ago, transferring ownership to a limited liability company he managed. Something about estate simplification. He sounded proud, like he'd just solved a problem for me. Maya handed me a folder thick with papers, each stamped and highlighted, and spoke about tax advantages and liquidating unnecessary assets. I remember staring at her manicured hands as she pointed to a line near the bottom. My name, printed beneath a blank space where a signature was meant to go. When I didn't speak, Caleb sighed. "Dad, this place is too much for you now," he said. "You shouldn't be here alone. We've arranged everything. The movers will come by tomorrow morning. You've got about 12 hours to get your things." The world seemed to tilt. 12 hours. After 43 years of marriage, after a lifetime in this home, my own son was telling me to leave it behind as if it were a rented cabin. Behind him, the funeral flowers still rested on the porch rail, petals falling one by one onto the clay tiles. I couldn't find words, only the echo of Evelyn's voice from weeks ago. "If something ever feels wrong, Tom, look in the hickory chest under the bed." Maya kept talking about a senior community with views of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, about a private room and a garden. I barely heard her. My eyes fixed on the framed photo of Evelyn that still sat by the hearth. her smile caught halfway between amusement and defiance, as if she already knew this day would come. "I'm staying here tonight," I said finally. My voice sounded foreign, scraped raw by disbelief. Caleb looked at Maya, then shrugged. "Do what you want," he muttered, "but the sale's already moving forward. It's what Mom wanted." I wanted to believe that was true, but Evelyn would never have done this without telling me. She kept meticulous records, color-coded files, handwritten notes pinned inside drawers. If she had planned something so drastic, there would be a trace of it. When they left, the sun had dropped behind the mesas, leaving the sky streaked with violet and ash. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the wooden beams I'd sanded smooth decades ago. Everything smelled of cedar and memory. On the kitchen table, the cup of coffee I'd poured that morning was still there, cold and bitter. In our bedroom, I knelt by the hickory chest and found it locked, the small brass key hanging from a string taped underneath. Inside were photo albums, an old jewelry box, and a single folded note in Evelyn's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means they're in a hurry. Wait until midnight." I didn't yet understand what she meant, but a strange calm settled over me. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the last petals from the funeral wreath across the yard. I sat by the fireplace, watching the candlelight flicker against the photo of the two of us from 1981, young, sunburned, laughing beneath the peach trees I planted for her. Somewhere in that dance of flame and shadow, I could almost hear her whisper again, "Don't let anyone decide what home means for you." Morning came gray and cold, the kind of morning that makes silence feel heavier. The air from the Sangre de Cristo Mountains drifted down through the valley, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine smoke. I sat in the kitchen with a mug of coffee I didn't taste, watching the light crawl slowly across the adobe floor. The funeral flowers had already begun to wilt, their colors fading into the same dull brown that coated everything else in the house. Grief had a way of turning the world monochrome. But beneath the grief, something new had started to stir, a quiet, persistent unease. Evelyn never made decisions lightly. The way Caleb spoke last night, as if she'd already signed over the house, didn't sit right with me. She had been deliberate, cautious to a fault. If she'd done something as drastic as transferring property, there would have been a record, a letter, a conversation, not silence. I spread the papers Caleb and Maya had left across the kitchen table. The first thing that caught my eye was the notary seal, wrong county. Santa Fe County had switched its official seal design last year, something Evelyn would have known because she was meticulous about details. The signature itself was off too. Evelyn's handwriting always curved upward like she was smiling through her pen. Here, the E slanted down, almost collapsing into itself. She only signed like that when she was exhausted or, God forbid, pressured. I went to her desk in the study. The drawers still smelled faintly of lavender oil and turpentine from her paints. Inside one folder, I found a fax dated 3 months earlier. To Linnea Cortez, attorney at law. Subject, estate planning revisions. Linnea had been our family lawyer for over a decade, a woman Evelyn trusted implicitly. Yet Linnea hadn't shown up to the funeral. I wondered if that was coincidence, or if someone had made sure I wouldn't see her. Around noon, Caleb came back. He didn't knock. "Brought lunch," he said, holding up a takeout bag. Maya followed, smiling like she owned the place already. She went straight to the living room and started gathering photo frames and paperwork into neat little piles. "We just want to make sure nothing gets misplaced," she said sweetly. I watched her angle her phone toward the documents, the faint shutter sound betraying what she was really doing. "Sentimental keepsakes," she added when she caught my look. I kept my voice steady. "You two are efficient. Your mother would have appreciated that." Caleb laughed, but it came out thin. "Mom wanted you comfortable, Dad." This is what she planned. I let him talk. Sometimes silence is the best lie detector. He filled the air with meaningless reassurances until finally they left, claiming they had to meet the escrow officer. When the door closed, I exhaled for the first time all morning. I sat at Evelyn's old desk again, this time taking apart the picture frame of our first trip to Taos. Behind the photo was something taped to the back, a small USB drive labeled Tax 2023_EVR. Next to it, a folded note in her handwriting. Don't let anyone else open this. When the time comes, trust your instincts. My fingers trembled. Evelyn had hidden this deliberately, not out of paranoia, but purpose. I placed it carefully in the pocket of my flannel shirt. If Caleb had noticed it, he would have taken it. Then came the knock on the door, a postal carrier holding a large manila envelope. The sender's name stopped me cold. Linnea Cortez, attorney at law. It was addressed to Evelyn, marked confidential. My heart raced as I tore it open. Inside was a summary of our trust. Reed Family Living Trust. Life estate retained by surviving spouse. Life estate. The phrase echoed in my head. It meant I had legal right to remain in this home until I died, regardless of what the heirs wanted. Caleb's scheme suddenly made sense. He couldn't inherit anything, not yet. Unless, of course, he found a way to make me leave. I reread every line of the document, my mind assembling the pieces Evelyn had left scattered like breadcrumbs. She had planned for this. She must have seen it coming. The pressure, the manipulation, the threat disguised as care. As the afternoon faded, I stepped outside to the backyard. The peach trees Evelyn planted swayed softly in the wind, shedding their last petals. The air was thin, sharp, full of that high desert quiet that made you hear your own heartbeat. "Did you know this would happen, Evelyn?" I whispered. A gust answered, scattering petals across my boots. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was something else. A warning, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. Back inside, I locked the USB, the legal documents, and her note inside the small safe behind the workshop door. Then I sat in the fading light, the same chair where Evelyn used to read in the evenings. The sun slipped low, painting the walls in amber. I realized I was no longer just grieving. I was beginning to prepare. In the house I had built with my hands, I could feel the walls whispering, "Be careful who you let in." The house was silent except for the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Midnight had always been Evelyn's hour. She said the world told the truth when it was too tired to lie. I sat in my study, staring at the small USB drive gleaming under the desk lamp. The words she had written, "Trust your instincts," echoed through my mind. I hesitated before sliding it into the port, half afraid of what I might find, half desperate for her voice again. The screen blinked, and a single file appeared. if_your_reading_this.move. My heart stopped. I clicked play. The room filled with Evelyn's image, her sitting in the living room, pale but composed, sunlight pouring through the window behind her. She looked tired, but her eyes were alive, deliberate. "Tom," she began softly, "if you're seeing this, it means things have started. It means Caleb or someone close to him is trying to take control." Her words came like tiny blades, each cutting deeper. She explained that while she was in the hospital, she'd noticed unusual withdrawals from their joint account. Funds she hadn't authorized. When she confronted Maya about it, Maya claimed it was a transfer for property taxes. But Evelyn checked with the county clerk. There had been no taxes due. "I didn't want to tell you while I was sick," Evelyn continued. "You had enough to carry, but I couldn't leave without protecting you." I leaned closer, feeling my throat tighten. Evelyn described how she'd worked with our lawyer, Linnea Cortez, to move all assets into the Reed Family Living Trust, ensuring I retained the legal right to live in the house until my death. "If they tell you otherwise," she warned, "they're lying." Then her voice shifted, steady, grave. "There's more you need to know." The video cut to her desk. She held up a notarized document, the header reading the Santa Fe Education Endowment. Evelyn's eyes glistened as she explained that she had redirected $1.4 million of their investments into a charitable foundation under my name. "Tom, this account only stays active as long as you're alive and can sign the annual verification," she said. "If anyone declares you missing, dead, or incompetent, the funds are locked permanently. No one can touch them." I sat frozen. Evelyn hadn't just protected our money. She'd built a legal fortress around me, but she'd also painted a target on my back. The video flickered again. If they think they can outsmart you, they'll move quickly. Keep records, stay calm, and when the time comes, call Linnea. Don't fight alone. Then, almost as if she knew I needed it, she smiled, small and weary, but still my Evelyn. The screen went black. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The weight of what she'd left behind settled in, a mix of grief, anger, and awe. She'd seen through them. She'd been fighting even while dying. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to absorb it all. That's when I heard it, the soft creak of the back door. I turned off the lamp. The only light came from the moon spilling across the floor. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Quietly, I reached for the old Louisville Slugger leaning by the wall, the one I'd used to teach Caleb baseball. The irony stung. Through the kitchen window, I saw movement, a faint glow from a phone flashlight. A figure moved along the porch, small, deliberate. Maya. She was peering through the window, scanning the room like a thief looking for something specific. I stayed still, crouched behind the curtain. The phone light swept across Evelyn's desk, then flicked off. I heard footsteps retreat, then the distant crunch of gravel as a car door shut. Headlights flared briefly, and a silver SUV rolled down the dirt road, disappearing into the dark. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. They weren't just planning, they were acting. And Evelyn's message had arrived just in time. I set up my phone, recorded a brief log, time, date, details of what I saw. Then I copied Evelyn's video, my footage of Maya, and the trust documents onto a separate hard drive. I labeled it evidence_1 and locked it in the safe with the rest. Outside, the wind rose again, rustling the peach trees. For the first time since Evelyn's death, I felt something stronger than grief, a purpose. I whispered to the darkness, "You were right, Evie. They're already moving." On the frozen video frame, Evelyn looked straight into the camera, as if through time itself, her final words frozen on the screen. "When the time comes, don't fight alone, Tom. Call Linnea." I looked at the clock, 12:04 a.m., the same minute she'd died 6 months earlier. A chill ran through me. I shut down the computer and stared into the darkness, the air thick with both fear and clarity. That night, I stopped being the grieving husband. I became the man Evelyn had prepared me to be, the one who would make sure her warning didn't come too late. The morning light felt thin, stretched across the kitchen tiles like something fragile. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, Evelyn's face appeared from the video, steady, composed, warning me to be careful. "Don't fight alone," she had said. Her words clung to the walls like incense smoke, impossible to clear. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but it tasted like ash. I needed answers, not caffeine. The only person who could give them to me was Linnea Cortez. Evelyn had trusted her completely, and if there was one thread left to pull, it was Linnea. I dug through the folder of old papers until I found her business card, cream-colored, faintly bent at the edges. When I called her office, a young woman's voice answered. "Cortez Law Group." "This is Thomas Reed," I said. "I need to speak with Linnea regarding my wife Evelyn's estate." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. Ms. Cortez is on an indefinite leave of absence." "Indefinite? What happened?" "A car accident, sir." "About a month ago. She's recovering, but we're not sure when she'll be back." I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear. Linnea, gone too. Evelyn's lawyer, the one person who knew the truth. "Can I at least verify something about our trust?" "I'll have someone reach out," the voice said quickly. Then the line went dead. My pulse hammered in my ears. It didn't feel like coincidence. I stared at the phone, and that's when I saw the notification. An unread email. No sender name, just a subject line. La Mesa Cafe, noon. The message was short. "Mr. Reed, if this is about Evelyn's trust, don't talk to anyone else. Meet me at La Mesa Cafe at noon. R.D." I didn't hesitate. La Mesa Cafe sat at the edge of Santa Fe's old town, the kind of place Evelyn loved. Hand-painted tiles, desert flowers and chipped vases, a radio whispering old Spanish ballads. I sat in the corner booth, facing the door, every nerve wired tight. At exactly noon, a woman in her early 30s approached, dark hair tied back, cautious eyes. "Mr. Reed?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I'm Rachel Dunn," she said, sliding into the seat opposite me. "I worked for Linnea. She asked me to give you this if something ever happened to her." She handed me a thick envelope. Inside were documents, voice transcriptions, and a USB. My heart thudded when I saw Evelyn's handwriting on the first page. "Living Trust, original copy." Rachel lowered her voice. Linnea was investigating something before the accident. She believed Maya Mitchell, your daughter-in-law, had connections to an Arizona firm involved in real estate fraud targeting elderly homeowners. She was about to file a report with the Financial Crimes Division when she was hit. I gripped the edge of the table. "You think that wasn't an accident?" Rachel's eyes flicked toward the window. "Let's just say Linnea had started looking into transactions connected to your wife's accounts. You need to be careful, Mr. Reed. You might already be on their radar." Outside, a silver SUV idled briefly before pulling away. I caught just a glimpse of the license plate, familiar. My stomach turned. Back home, I locked the door and pulled the blinds. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing what I did best, organizing. I cataloged every file, backed up every document, and installed 2 small security cameras, one facing the porch, another watching the back gate. My hands moved with mechanical precision, the same discipline I'd once used when setting up secure systems for the Army years ago. Evelyn used to tease me about being paranoid. Turns out she'd been right to marry one. Before dusk, I drafted a handwritten letter to Sheriff Paul Henderson, an old friend of mine who owed Evelyn his second chance after she helped his daughter get a scholarship. I enclosed copies of the trust documents and a note that read, "If anything happens to me, deliver this to the district attorney's office immediately." I sealed the envelope and drove it to the post drop near the plaza. When I returned, the answering machine was blinking. Caleb's voice filled the room, strained but controlled. "Dad, we need to talk. Someone told me Mom set up a secret foundation in your name. That could cause legal trouble. Just call me before you do anything stupid." I listened twice. His tone wasn't concern, it was fear. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I deleted the message and turned on my laptop. The camera feed blinked to life. Empty yard, quiet porch. But as I scrolled through the overnight footage, my chest tightened. Around 3:07 a.m., headlights appeared. The same silver SUV paused at the edge of the driveway, engine running for a full minute before pulling away. Maya's car. I exhaled slowly, forcing calm. They thought they were ahead of me. They thought I was still the grieving old man who'd sign whatever papers they put in front of him. Evelyn had known better. I sat at her desk, tracing my fingers over the grain of the wood she'd sanded smooth years ago. "They think they're hunting me," I whispered, "but you already gave me the map." The first rays of sunrise brushed against the window, turning the adobe walls gold. I sealed the new evidence in a manila envelope, placed it in the safe, and locked it tight. Grief had turned into resolve. They wanted me gone, but I had just begun to stay. 3 days passed after the meeting at La Mesa Cafe, but the quiet in my house didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched. Every car that slowed outside made my chest tighten. Every shadow on the porch felt deliberate. The cameras I'd installed blinked softly, recording the kind of stillness that makes a man listen for ghosts. I'd gone from mourning to survival, and Evelyn's warning echoed in every heartbeat. They'll come when they think you're weakest. That morning, the knock came, firm, controlled. I opened the door to find Caleb and Maya standing side by side, rehearsed expressions painted on. Caleb carried a manila folder. Maya had that same polite smile she used at Evelyn's funeral. Too perfect to be real. "Dad," Caleb said, stepping in before I invited them, "we need to clear the air. There's been a lot of confusion about Mom's estate. Confusion? I asked, shutting the door behind them. Seems pretty clear to me. Maya set her purse on the counter, speaking softly. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Harold. Things can get complicated at your age, medical emergencies, financial issues. She slid a document toward me. Across the top it read, Durable Power of Attorney for Financial and Health Decisions. My stomach turned. This would make everything easier, she continued. You wouldn't have to worry about paperwork or payments. Caleb can handle it for you. I looked up at her, steady. You mean Caleb, and you can handle everything for me? She blinked but didn't flinch. Caleb tried to sound patient. Dad, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're not trying to take anything. We just want to help. I leaned back in the chair, every muscle tight but my voice calm. You said that when you tried to sell the house last month too? Caleb froze. What? I'm not the one confused here, I said, nodding toward the hidden camera on the bookshelf. You came here with forged documents once. I won't let you try again. Maya's mask slipped first. You can't live here forever, Harold, she snapped. This house will rot around you. You're one fall away from ending up in a home, and then all this will be wasted. Caleb grabbed her arm, whispering, Maya, stop. But she didn't. We can't sit around waiting for you to die before we move forward. You're clinging to something that should have been ours years ago. The words hit harder than I expected, though I'd already known what they wanted. I reached slowly into my pocket and pressed the record button on my phone. Then I said quietly, You sound just like the people Evelyn warned me about. Caleb paled. Dad, please, don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, I said. You just told me exactly who you are. Maya's face flushed red, her voice sharp as broken glass. You think anyone's going to believe you? They already know you're forgetful. You misplace bills. You talk to yourself. They'll call it early dementia, and you'll be signing whatever we put in front of you. That was the moment the grief finally burned away. I stood, towering over both of them, voice steady but cold. I've lived long enough to know the difference between a son and a thief wearing my son's face. Caleb's jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he'd hit me. Then he grabbed Maya's wrist and stormed out. We'll talk again when you're ready to be reasonable, he muttered. The door slammed. Silence returned, thick and electric. I sat down slowly, my pulse hammering in my temples. But I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I saved the audio recording, labeled it Exhibit A, and emailed a copy to Rachel. Not long after, my inbox pinged with a new message. No subject, no sender. The title line read, You don't know the whole story. I hesitated, then opened it. A single image appeared, a grainy still from a bank's security camera. Caleb and Maya, both sitting across a desk from a man in a suit. Caleb signing papers. The logo on the window said SunWest Realty Holdings, Phoenix, Arizona. My breath caught. I zoomed in on the timestamp, 2 weeks before Evelyn died. My hands shook as the truth unfurled. They hadn't just planned to steal after her death. They had been preparing it before she took her last breath. Evelyn's illness had been their opportunity. I forwarded the image to Rachel with a short note. Tell the investigator Linnea worked with, this goes to federal fraud. She replied within minutes. Understood. Keep yourself safe. They're desperate. That night, I double-checked the locks and watched the camera feed. Around 11 p.m., the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a low male voice said, Stop digging, Mr. Reed. You don't want to end up like the lawyer. My grip tightened on the receiver. Too late, I said. You should have stopped before you touched her name. The line went dead. I walked to the front door and looked outside. The silver SUV sat under the elm tree across the street, engine idling, lights off. I picked up the old wooden bat from beside the fireplace, stepped onto the porch, and stared straight into the dark. They wanted me to disappear quietly, I said to the night, but I'm going to make them loud enough for the whole world to hear. The porch light flickered as the SUV pulled away. I didn't move until the road was empty. The war Evelyn saw coming had begun, and this time, I was ready to fight. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, soft and indifferent, as if the world had no idea war was unfolding inside one old man's house. The night's phone threat still echoed in my ears. I hadn't slept. I sat at the table surrounded by piles of papers, flash drives, and handwritten notes, my fortress of evidence. Every shadow on the wall felt alive, every creak in the floorboards a whisper that I didn't have much time left to decide. Two paths stretched in front of me. One meant packing a single bag, leaving Santa Fe, and pretending the ghosts behind me didn't exist. The other meant staying, risking everything, to expose the people who had already killed my peace. I kept asking myself what Evelyn would say if she were here. I didn't need long to hear the answer. I could still see her in the garden that summer, before she got sick. Her straw hat tilted, her hands dirty with soil. "If truth ever costs you peace, pay the price," she'd said, brushing her gloves clean. "It's cheaper than regret." That line had sounded poetic back then. Now it felt like a command. I realized what scared me most wasn't losing my home. It was dying a coward, letting her legacy rot in the hands of thieves. By mid-morning, I powered up the computer and sent Rachel everything. Every photo, recording, and document I had collected. 10 minutes later, her message popped up. "Agent Porter has been assigned to Linnea's case. He's a federal investigator. He wants to meet you in person." Federal. The word carried both relief and danger. If I stepped into that room, there was no turning back. Rachel called a few minutes later, her voice low. "Mr. Reed, Porter's solid. Linnea trusted him, but he's not the only one watching this case. There are other eyes on you now, people who won't like what you're doing." "I figured," I said, glancing toward the window where the curtain swayed slightly, though the air was still. "Tell him I'll come." The call ended, and I began preparing. Years of military training kicked in. I made lists, labeled files, created duplicates. I printed Evelyn's video transcript, her trust papers, and my recorded conversations with Caleb and Maya. I wrote a short statement in my own hand. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm defending what was earned by love, time, and work." When I finished, the house felt lighter somehow, as if Evelyn was approving the order I'd restored, but peace didn't last. Around 2 p.m., the phone rang again. "Caleb." I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear his voice, to see how far gone he truly was. "Dad," he began, his voice cracking. "Please, you have to stop this. Don't talk to anyone. You're making this worse for all of us." "Worse?" I said calmly. "You made it worse when you lied about your mother's will." There was silence. Then he said, "You don't understand. I was trying to fix things. I got involved with people I shouldn't have. They wanted collateral, and Mom's assets looked like the only way out. I never meant for it to go this far. So, you sold me out to save yourself," I said quietly. "Dad, it's complicated." "No, Caleb. It's simple. You betrayed your own blood before she was even gone." He said nothing for several seconds, then hung up. The empty dial tone hummed like a verdict. I sat there, staring at the silent receiver, realizing that whatever part of him Evelyn once loved was gone. By dusk, I had packed the evidence into a worn leather satchel. Before leaving, I checked the camera footage one last time. Most clips were normal: shadows, animals, passing cars. But then, at 2:43 a.m., movement flickered across the porch. A man, not Maya. Taller, broad shoulders, a baseball cap pulled low. He crouched near the door, glanced around, then stepped out of frame. I froze the video, zoomed in on his face. It was him, the man from the bank photo sitting across from Caleb 2 weeks before Evelyn's death. The Phoenix connection. It wasn't just my family anymore. It was a ring, a network of predators feeding on people like us. I burned the image onto a disk and slid it into my bag. Then I grabbed the keys. The sun was sinking, bleeding orange over the desert horizon. I got into my truck, the leather seat creaking under me, and started the engine. The house stood quiet behind me, holding every memory of our life together. As I drove toward the highway, the rearview mirror caught movement, headlights glinting in the distance. The silver SUV. It followed at a steady pace, too cautious to overtake. I pressed my foot on the gas, merging onto the main road. The sky darkened, the mountains casting long shadows over the desert. My hands were steady now. Fear had burned itself out, leaving something cleaner behind. Resolve. Evelyn once told me, storms don't destroy what's built on truth. They just reveal what's weak. I tightened my grip on the wheel, watching the SUV fade in and out of view. I had made my choice. I wasn't running anymore. I was driving straight through the storm she saw coming. By the time I got home from the federal office, the sun was already sliding behind the mountains. The house looked smaller than I remembered, lonely, stripped of comfort, but still standing. I set my satchel on the table and sat down, feeling the weight of what had just happened. For the first time in months, I'd told the whole story out loud. No interruptions, no gaslighting, no one calling me paranoid. Agent Porter had listened carefully, his hands folded, eyes sharp, as if he'd already known half the truth. "The evidence you've given us matches an ongoing federal case," he'd said. "Property fraud across 3 states. We've been tracking a shell company called SunWest Realty, Phoenix base, but they've got operations in Texas and Colorado too. Your son's signature appears on multiple transactions." Hearing it from a federal agent should have felt like victory. Instead, it landed like grief all over again. Porter told me to stay quiet, stay unreachable. "You might have rattled a nest of snakes," he said, "and snakes bite when cornered." Now, sitting in my dim living room, I could almost hear them slithering through the dark. The first blow came that evening. My phone buzzed, an alert from the bank. "Your account has been temporarily suspended due to suspicious activity." My pulse spiked. I logged in from my laptop. The page froze halfway through. Then came the messages. "Old man, you think the feds can save you?" Followed by another. "You'll wish you'd stayed quiet." No number, just threats. Around midnight, a crash shattered the silence. I rushed to the front room. Someone had thrown a brick through the window. Shards glistened on the floor like ice. I didn't call the police. I didn't need more noise in the system. Instead, I picked up my phone and recorded the scene. Time-stamped it, uploaded it to the cloud. Another file for Porter's folder. By dawn, I was exhausted. The air smelled like dust and adrenaline. I sat in Evelyn's chair by the window, glass crunching softly under my shoes. For a while, I let myself imagine her voice, calm, steady, never afraid. She'd look at me with that quiet strength and say, "You're not done yet." She was right. I pulled out my notebook and began to write, page after page, everything that had happened since the funeral. The day Caleb told me to leave, the USB, the cafe, the threats. It wasn't just for me, it was for her. A record, so no one could twist our story again. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Rachel. "Mr. Reed," she said quickly, "Porter just called me." They traced money transfers through a Texas intermediary. Caleb's under surveillance. But Maya's gone. She disappeared 2 nights ago. Her SUV was found near the New Mexico border, engine still running. I swallowed hard. Gone? She may be hiding. Or someone made her disappear. Porter thinks this goes deeper than family fraud. Organized rings, forged titles, offshore accounts. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the sunlight breaking through the cracked window. The world outside carried on like nothing had happened, but inside me, something shifted. Fear gave way to fury. Late afternoon brought another surprise. A knock on the door, soft but deliberate. When I opened it, no one was there. Only an envelope wedged under the mat. My name, written in red ink. Inside were 2 photographs. The first was of Evelyn in her hospital bed, eyes closed, oxygen tube in place. The second made my blood run cold, a shadowy figure standing behind her bed curtain. Caleb, his head bowed, hand in his pocket. The back of the photo carried 4 words, scrawled in the same red ink. "This ends when you end it." I sat there for a long time, the photos trembling in my hands. Every part of me wanted to collapse. But then I thought of Evelyn, her laughter, her stubborn hope, her quiet courage. If this was the hill they wanted me to die on, then it would also be the one I defended until my last breath. I stood up, walked to the safe, and pulled out the old revolver I hadn't touched in 20 years. I cleaned it carefully, loaded 5 rounds, and set it on the table beside the photos. Not because I wanted to use it, but because I refused to be the easy target they thought I was. That night, I turned off every light in the house. The darkness wrapped around me like armor. Outside, a car engine idled for a few seconds before cutting off. I moved quietly to the window, parted the curtain just enough to see the faint glow of a cigarette in the driveway. Someone was watching. I whispered toward Evelyn's photo on the wall. "They don't know yet, do they? You left me the courage, too." The glow disappeared, swallowed by the night. I sat back down, revolver within reach, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound left. My heart was steady, my resolve sharper than ever. Justice wasn't something I was asking for anymore. It was something I was about to deliver myself. The morning light came through the shattered window like a reluctant guest, slicing across the mess left from the night before. Glass glittered on the floor, the air still heavy with dust and silence. I swept slowly, each scrape of the broom echoing through the house that used to hum with Evelyn's laughter. My hands trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. I was done letting them turn me into prey. I picked up the phone and called Agent Porter. He answered on the first ring. "Porter here." "They've been here again," I said flatly. "Someone left a package, photos of my wife, and a message." There was a pause. "What kind of message?" "The kind written in red ink." He cursed under his breath. "They're escalating, Thomas. Don't stay there alone. We can place you in protective custody." "I'm not running from my own home," I said, voice steady. "This is the last place Evelyn lived. I'm staying." He hesitated, then relented. "Fine. I'll send someone to keep watch. Agent Mills, young, reliable, keep your doors locked until he gets there." By noon, a silver government sedan pulled into my driveway. Mills stepped out, sharp haircut, clean suit, maybe 30 at most. He scanned the property before knocking. "Mr. Reed?" "That's me." He nodded, setting up his laptop on the dining table. "I'll be stationed here for the next few days. Just routine observation." "Routine," I muttered. Nothing about this has been routine since my wife's funeral. At first, Mills treated me like I was fragile, an old man spooked by shadows. But as the hours passed and I told him everything, Caleb's betrayal, the fake documents, the money trail, his expression shifted from polite detachment to grim respect. "You could have left," he said quietly that evening. "Started over somewhere safe." I looked at him, then at the photo of Evelyn on the mantle. "You can't start over when you let evil finish what love built." He said nothing after that. The next morning, Mills reviewed footage from my security cameras. Around 2 a.m., a silver SUV appeared at the edge of the property, the same one from the brick-throwing incident. He tracked the license plate, then frowned. "This plate's been recorded near your wife's hospital 6 months ago, and again outside a Phoenix real estate office last year." My heart sank. "So, this didn't start after Evelyn died?" "No," he said grimly. "It started before. Someone's been watching your family for a long time." I sat back, realization hitting like a wave. Evelyn had gotten strange phone calls in the weeks before she passed. Anonymous, always silent on the other end. She'd brushed them off, said it was probably telemarketers. Maybe it wasn't. We spent the rest of the day building a strategy. Mills drafted an affidavit for me. Every detail of what had happened, notarized and time-stamped. We sent copies to Agent Porter and sealed one for a local journalist at the Santa Fe Journal with a simple note. "If anything happens to me, publish this story." For the first time, I felt like I was steering the current instead of drowning in it. The truth was my only weapon, but it was sharp enough to cut through the lies. That night, as I sat at Evelyn's old desk, I ran my fingers over a faded wedding photo. She'd once told me, "Truth doesn't always save you, but it saves what you stand for." I whispered those words now like a prayer. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one rewrote our lives into a story of weakness. Around midnight, Mill's voice cut through the quiet. "Mr. Reed, you might want to see this." He was by the back door, flashlight aimed at the ground. A set of footprints crossed the dirt, leading toward the road, fresh. Next to them, a cigarette butt still smoked faintly in the cool night air. Mills crouched. "Same brand you mentioned your son smoked?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Caleb was never one for subtlety. We followed the tracks halfway down the road until they vanished into gravel. The silence between us was heavy. Mills looked at me, uneasy. "You think he's watching you?" "I think," I said, "he's making sure I stay quiet." When we got back to the house, I sat by the window, the revolver resting beside me. Mills took the night shift, pacing near the porch. I turned off every light except the one over Evelyn's photo. I opened my notebook and wrote the final entry for the night. Tomorrow they'll come again. But I'm not waiting for them this time. Tomorrow I strike back. Outside, the wind rustled through the juniper trees, whispering against the glass like a warning or a promise. For months, they'd written my ending. Now, it was my turn to hold the pen. The storm that morning rolled across Santa Fe like a warning. The sky was the color of lead, and the wind rattled the loose panes of my repaired window. I hadn't slept. Every tick of the clock pushed me closer to the moment I'd been waiting for, and dreading. The phone buzzed on the table. It was Mills. "They found the SUV," he said. "Warehouse off Route 14. Abandoned property. Could be where they're keeping the hard drives." I looked at the revolver beside my notebook. "I'm going," I said. "You should wait for backup," he insisted. "You can't win a war if you never show up to the battlefield." By the time I reached the warehouse, clouds hung low, turning the world gray. The structure was skeletal, corrugated metal, half-collapsed signage, and the faint smell of oil and dust. My boots crunched on gravels as I stepped through the side entrance, gun drawn, heart steady. Inside, the air was thick with damp concrete and something sour, fear, maybe mine. A low voice echoed through the space. "You should have stayed quiet, Mr. Reed." I froze. Out from the shadows stepped a man in a charcoal suit, early 50s, his expression calm and poisonous. Evan Rourke. I'd seen his name on the forged deeds Mills found. He was the spider at the center of this web. He smirked. "Old men rarely survive curiosity." Behind him, I heard another voice, trembling. "Dad." "Caleb." He looked hollow, pale, his hands bound with zip ties. Beside him stood Maya, her expression unreadable. My stomach clenched. "Caleb," I said softly, "you weren't supposed to bury your mother for profit." His face twisted. "You think I wanted this?" "You think I knew what he was doing?" Rourke chuckled. He knew enough. Signed what we told him, cashed the checks, and cried about family legacy. I turned my gaze on Caleb. "You used her death to make deals with the devil. You sold my grief by the pound." Tears welled in his eyes. "I thought it was an investment to save the house, Dad. I didn't know he was using Mom's name for offshore transfers." "Maya?" "She said it was legal." Maya stepped forward. "It was, until you started asking questions." The truth hit like a hammer. Caleb wasn't the architect. He was a pawn. And I'd spent months hating a son who had been manipulated by greed he didn't understand. But Rourke had underestimated one thing. I'd spent 30 years hunting men like him for the Bureau. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the flash drive. "Everything you've built is on here. Every fake signature, every wire transfer. You're done." Rourke smiled thinly. "No, you're done. Take the old man. Make it look like a robbery." A gun clicked behind me. Two men in dark jackets moved fast, but not fast enough. The front door burst open. Mills and 3 agents stormed in, shouting commands. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Gunfire, shouts, the clang of metal. I hit the floor, crawling toward Caleb as bullets sparked off the wall. "Dad!" he yelled, but I was already there, dragging him behind a crate. "Stay down!" One of Rourke's men rushed forward. I fired once, just enough to graze his arm. Another shot came from the agents. The man went down. Rourke tried to run, but Mills caught him halfway to the exit, tackling him hard. The revolver in my hand felt heavier than it had in decades. The noise faded, replaced by the ringing in my ears and the metallic scent of gunpowder. Caleb slumped beside me, blood streaking his sleeve from a shallow cut. "I thought I could fix it," he whispered. "I ruined everything." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Then start fixing it by telling the truth." Outside, red and blue lights strobed against the storm clouds as agents led Rourke and Maya to waiting cars. Porter arrived moments later, trench coat whipping in the wind. "You just cracked a multi-state fraud ring, Thomas," he said, shaking his head. "You did what we couldn't." I looked at the warehouse, its steel frame groaning in the wind, a monument to everything that had nearly destroyed my family. "I didn't do it for the Bureau," I said quietly. "I did it for Evelyn." The rain started then, gentle but steady. It washed the dust off my shoes, the blood from Caleb's hands. He looked at me with red eyes. "What now?" "Now," I said, "you tell them everything. And when you're done, you live better than this." As the agents drove away, I stood alone under the breaking storm. The clouds thinned, letting a faint stripe of sunlight through. I looked up and whispered, "It's over, Evelyn. You can rest now." Mills approached, voice soft. "What will you do now, Mr. Reed?" I holstered the revolver, turned toward the road. What I should have done long ago, live and make sure no one else loses their home to greed. He nodded, eyes steady. Justice doesn't erase the scars, but it stops the bleeding. And that morning, for the first time in a long while, I felt the wound begin to close. 6 months had passed since the warehouse and the storm that almost took everything from me. Santa Fe had slipped quietly back into its rhythm. Dusty winds, warm light, and mornings that began with the sound of sparrows tapping against the kitchen window. I still lived in the same house, but it no longer felt haunted. The broken glass had been replaced, the garden revived. Evelyn's roses bloomed again, stubborn and red, as if defying the memory of decay. Every morning, I brewed 1 cup of coffee and sat by the window, the same spot where I once waited for a knock that might end me. Now, the light coming through that glass didn't hurt anymore. It just reminded me of what I'd survived and what she had left behind. Caleb visited often. He wasn't the same man who once told me I had 12 hours to leave my home. The arrogance had burned away, leaving something humbler in its place. He taught math now at the local community college, spending his weekends volunteering at the senior center I joined as an advisor. Sometimes we didn't talk about the past at all. Sometimes we did. Either way, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to let go. Maya wasn't so lucky. 12 years for fraud and conspiracy. Rourke got 25, no parole. The newspapers called it the Reed real estate ring. I never liked that name. It made it sound like I was part of it, but maybe, in a way, I was. I'd built a family strong enough for love, but weak enough for greed to enter through the cracks. That truth stung, but it was mine to carry. Agent Mills stopped by every other week, usually bringing a newspaper or a slice of peach pie from the diner down the road. He'd been transferred to the Financial Crimes Division in Denver, but he said the case changed him. "You showed me something they don't teach at Quantico," he told me once. "That justice isn't about catching bad guys. It's about protecting good people before they fall." That stuck with me. So, when the county invited me to speak at a local elder safety workshop, I said yes. I stood in front of a room full of people my age, faces lined with history, eyes full of quiet fear, and told them what Evelyn would have told me. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's proof that we've lived, that we've loved. But love doesn't mean blind trust. Ask questions, keep records, stay connected. Because isolation is the thief's first ally. When I finished, they clapped, not loud, not showy, just sincere. A woman in the front row whispered, "Thank you for saying what we all feel." That was enough. One evening, while cleaning the study, I found an envelope tucked in the back of Evelyn's desk drawer. The paper had yellowed slightly, her handwriting delicate but firm. The date was 3 days before she went into the hospital. If grief ever makes you doubt yourself, it read, remember, truth is the only inheritance worth keeping. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hand. I realized she'd seen all of this coming, not the specifics, but the shape of it, the way life tests love through loss, the way truth demands to be found, no matter how long it hides. I folded the letter back carefully and slipped it into my journal. The next morning, I drove to the hill behind our house, the place where Evelyn and I used to watch sunsets when the world still felt endless. The horizon glowed gold, the wind carrying the faint smell of rain. I opened a small jar of dried rose petals from her garden and let them scatter across the slope. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, I whispered. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to bear. For the first time, I felt light, not unscarred, but unburdened. That night, I sat at my desk and recorded a message for a community video series Mills had helped organize. The camera light blinked red, and I began. If you're watching this, you've probably lost something: money, trust, family, maybe even yourself. I know how that feels, but justice isn't revenge, it's restoration. It's remembering who you were before they made you doubt your worth, and it's choosing to stand again. I paused, breathing in the stillness of the room. Love built this house once, I said quietly. Truth kept it standing. And as long as I breathe, no one will tear it down again. When I stopped the recording, the room felt full. Evelyn's warmth, Caleb's laughter, the hum of a life rebuilt not from victory, but from endurance. The sun slipped below the horizon, and for the first time in years, I didn't dread the dark. Because I knew, finally, that the story wasn't about what I'd lost. It was about what I'd learned, and what I'd protected for those still to come. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.